Greetings of the day, my fellow listeners, and welcome to another edition of Building Better Businesses. I am your host, Steve Eschbach. I own a business here in Naperville, Illinois called Transworld Business Advisors. Or I should say, our group is one of about 6 or 7 in the Chicagoland area. And Transworld Business Advisors is an M&A firm that assists buyers and sellers with the purchase and sale of both businesses and real estate. On the real estate side, I'm affiliated with a local organization called Caton Commercial Real Estate, a staple here in Naperville for quite some time. I'm delighted today to have I would say a physician's or a medical practitioner here who has got a good story, an interesting story about his entrepreneurial path, if you will, and it's taken various levels during the course of his career, but we'll learn more about that in short order. So first of all, Dr. Green, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to getting some insights as to how you got to be where you are today. But what I typically do with my guests is I rewind the videotape pretty extensively, and we start back in your childhood. And the first thoughts I want to see if you can share with us is back in the day when you were probably on your tricycle or your bicycle with training wheels. What was going through your mind back then, and how did that play a part in where your career is today?
My dad was probably a big influence on me then. He was the first entrepreneur I ever knew. Came from a line of entrepreneurs. His dad started a printing business in the Philadelphia area, and then my dad was a general contractor, basically. So I watched him build his life around his business in a way that allowed him to coach my baseball teams and do a lot of things with the family, and that flexibility was, I guess, my first lesson in business.
So it appears that you never actually went to work at a corporation or a business owned by someone else. You were basically an entrepreneur at heart from the get-go, and it sounds like your father was a strong influence on that.
That's not entirely true. I mean, I did work for several hospitals. My training's emergency medicine. And then at some point started a side hustle that became more of a main hustle, although I do still work some emergency medicine because I really like it.
Yeah. So you're in the medical profession. It sounds like your father was not. So how did you kind of move into the medical field during your formative years? Let's say, grammar school, high school, and then college. How did that all evolve?
I was gifted with a very good memory. Unfortunately, I no longer have quite the same memory, but when you have that, you do well in school. And when you do well in school, everyone says, "Well, you should be a doctor." And so I kind of got in that track for what do you need to do next to become a doctor, and nothing ever knocked me out of the track. I kept passing the next test and enjoying the next step and all the way on. And looking back, I was very lucky in all my choices of just following the track.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So how did you get all your insights? It sounds like you had some people kind of pushing you along a little bit, giving you some advice when you were kind of in your formative years. What additional insights did you gain during those early years in your career?
Um, a hard work ethic was impressed on me by my dad, but also the balance of work and life. Working smarter and harder. I never, I was always kind of a work hard, play hard. And so all of my choices revolved around that kind of flexibility and enjoyment of a multitude of things. Um, I chose emergency medicine because I couldn't choose one specific field per se, and I liked a little bit of everything, and emergency medicine provides that. And it also provides the flexibility. You work, 10 to 15 shifts a month, and you have the other 10 to 15 days off. And so it's really good for my personality type of enjoying uh, variety and, not having that many commitments when you leave the office.
Absolutely. So it's interesting that your career path included being an emergency physician, and then now you own MGMD Aesthetics, which I don't know if that really is related. Maybe there's a relationship there. in that career path that isn't as clear to me and others. So how did you go from emergency to something a little bit different, like where you are today in your own practice?
It's a happy and sad story. Back in the day, I started 20 years ago with a business that was not called MGMD Aesthetics. It was the beginning of my entrepreneur journey, really. Um, at the time, I was working in an emergency department that was super busy, and there was a lot of staff that were kind of burned out, and I could see that I was working with people that basically weren't happy to be there, and it sometimes kind of took it out on the patients in little ways, like, uh, where, uh, for instance, there are patients that don't take good care of themselves and they end up in the emergency room over and over again, or they show up drunk and they pee all over the bed. And it's certainly frustrating, but I think that the staff doesn't need to like say, well, we're going to put a bigger IV in him this time and maybe he'll learn. Uh, and I just didn't like that burnt out, jaded attitude. And as an emergency physician, you almost have no control over who you work with. The hospital decides who you're working with. And I wanted to start a business where I could create an environment that was positive and happy, and I could have control over who I was going to work with and the hiring and firing. And so I did that about 20 years ago. I started at the beginning of laser hair removal, just in the interest of having a medical business of my own where I could create an environment to do good for people. And that was right at the very beginning of the aesthetics industry. Like Botox just came out at that time. And so then the laser hair removal transitioned to Botox, transitioned to all these other amazing aesthetic procedures. And I just followed that path and it led me to where I am today.
So how would you characterize some of your learning experiences along the way? It sounds like earlier on, there was a little bit of burnt out attitudes or experiences from some of your colleagues, and didn't sound like you liked that as much. But if you look at your website, and we'll be able to have you identify that later on, sounds like you do a lot of investing in your patients. You do a lot of listening and learning, and then you respond and treat accordingly. Is that your philosophy? And did that evolve over what you didn't like in your other work environments?
I feel like I was always like that. I feel like it's giving good care. I was thinking about this the other day. You know, they ask you in your business, like, what are you really selling? And on the very strict concrete definition, I'm selling Botox and facial fillers, right? But then you take it to the next level and you're selling self-confidence and youthful appearance. But then I took it to the next level and I was like, I am selling love and faith because I have a love for all the people that come to me. Even when I was in the emergency room, I always tell residents when I was training them, you got to treat everyone as if they were your family member. And sometimes we all have a crazy uncle that we don't want to deal with very much, but you have to have an underlying love and care for that person in order to do the right thing. And that's a philosophy that I've taken over into my practice in aesthetics. I really have a genuine love and caring for the people that I take care of. And, I'm happy to say that most of my patients I would hang out with. I've done a really good job at attracting people that kind of fit my personality and I fit theirs.
Yeah, that sounds like a good philosophy to have. So, based on what you're telling me, and I don't know if this is true or not, but did any one particular colleague or business networking circle of influence person give you a piece of advice to move you in that direction? Or was that instilled in you from the get-go just by, what you kind of did and how you did it?
I think that just comes from who I am. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, many physicians start out just wanting to help people and do good and take care of people. And, I've done a lot of that in my business to a fault. I don't want to say ignored, but been naive about the business side of business and leaned a little bit more on the caring and probably spend more time than I should. Although at this point my business is growing, so I don't need to like chop, chop, chop. The place that I came from prior to my current iteration of my business was a large medical spa with a big churn and a big turnover of patients. And the owner and I kind of had a disagreement about that because while I know that you have to think of it as a business, I think there has to be a big element of caring in there. And so my care acumen was always high. My business acumen has been a work in progress.
Yeah, so that sounds like I said, it's a good philosophy, and sounds like a lot of what you experienced, you kind of put into practice, and kind of gave the comfort level to your clients and your patients, and all along the path. So that's really good. So what advice would you give? So we're going to talk a little bit about building a better business. Now, you are a
Sure.
medical practitioner, and of course, you care about the health and well-being of your clients and your patients. But what about what it is that you do that you implement that kind of makes it a better business for someone like you or another individual practitioner that would want to do something like you?
I mean, the number one thing is you're dealing with mostly happy people. And so that's nice. But flexibility is one of my core values, and so it allows me to set up my schedule however I want. So that's uh, something that's important. And then getting back to the care, I think that my two tenets of my current iteration of my business. Uh, well, number one, you have to be good at what you do. I mean, that's just a given. But in terms of business, I wanted low overhead and uh, great customer service. And so
So go ahead.
I think those two things are really important at where I am, and I've learned by, not having low overhead, and that's, for instance, that's the reason why I don't own a bunch of lasers. In this business, it's easy to spend, $150,000 on a laser, and then next thing you know, you've got a monthly uh, uh, expenses that's very difficult to keep up with. So I've set my business up in a way that it's low overhead, which allows me to really do a good job and be competitive with pricing. And at the level of customer service that I give, uh, it's easy for me to have long-term retention of my customers.
So how about business wise? So I would assume that there's a team that will help you in terms of the items that need to get done that necessarily is not what you like to do best. So accounting, legal, marketing, HR. How does that all work with someone like you who's an individual practitioner?
I have a good attorney for my industry, most of which is from a solopreneur is built around compliance with the medical regulation. In terms of that covers, advertising, my website, the things that they can say, and how I can incentivize patients to send me people and all that. So my attorney was really important. Uh, Counseling and bookkeeping is very important. I'm not very good at that. I have a bookkeeper that goes into my uh, stuff and categorizes all the business expenses, and an accountant that helps me strategize in terms of mostly tax liability. Um, and then I guess the best thing, uh, you and I both know, Kevin, the best thing that's helped me grow my business is my website. It's been knocking it out of the park. I mean, I think that my growth, which has been, 100% year over year for the last 2 years, is mostly, now I started at a relatively low level, so I know that sounds amazing, but is mostly based on the fact that number one, my search engine optimization on my website functions very well. And number two, when they find my website, I have really good reviews.
Yeah, that's good. I've seen some of the comments on your website, and what kind of resonates and stands out is a lot about how you really care about what it is the patient wants. It's not necessarily what you want to give them. It's basically tell me about what it is you are, who it is you are, where you're at, and what you want to do going forward. And that goes a long way in terms of building a patient trust and loyalty. And I think that's probably a part and parcel to the reason for your success.
Now, I mean, I spend 90 minutes with every new patient. I don't think anybody does that. I sort of have the luxury of time right now to do that, but the first question I ask them is, how can I help you? That's number one. How can I help you? And I was doing my treatments for the first 10 years, kind of the same for everyone, which you can get away with that because they're pretty good. The stuff that I use, like Botox and facial fillers, work pretty well. But then there was a switch in my mind in terms of my ability where you could see the nuance. And like in anything, it takes about the same amount of energy to get from 50% to 90% as it does to get from 90 to 100. And it's those last little tiny nuanced things that have allowed me to really excel in terms of what I can do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what do you see out there as in terms of your big challenges going forward? I mean, to grow revenues like you said you have is a huge accomplishment, and kudos to you for getting all that done. But what are some of the challenges that kind of cause you to veer a little bit left and right, or what causes you to kind of make some shifts to continue that success as you have?
I'm at the point now where I work about 3 or 4 days a week in my office, but I'm getting so busy that I'm going to have to hire someone to work the days that I'm not there. And so growth is my growth is my current challenge. And then there's the possibility of scale. I don't think it would be that difficult once my concept is completely, watertight to scale to a couple, 3 locations.
So how long has MGMD Aesthetics been up and running? That's fairly new, or how many years?
End of 2018, so about 5 years.
Yeah. So having to look for
years, I had little kids, and I wasn't putting a lot of energy into it. It was a side hustle, almost a hobby. In business terms, it was a hobby.
Yeah.
And then just the last 2, 3 years, it's been more energy, more metrics, more.
So it's interesting that the next goal for you is growth and perhaps bringing on someone else. That's a good problem to have, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the thing that I'm afraid of is, the potential outside influences that could affect that, like the economy, right? We're all looking at that horizon.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your business and your ideal client. So it's MGMD Aesthetics. Tell us a little bit more about the services you provide, the types of clients that you're looking to gain or currently have. How does that all work in your practice?
So when I started this version of my business, I decided, the low overhead and great customer service, and then I decided also to focus just on the face. And so, all the things that I do are tried and true. Botox is probably number 1. Facial fillers are number 2. A couple of other procedures, one called Kybella. But basically, my avatar or my main customer is let's call it a 40 to 50-year-old mom who is losing some volume in the face and wants to get back her youthful appearance. I have a lot of people and let me put it this way, a 40 to 50-year-old working mom, usually, right? They're working, they're tired, they're handling a lot of things, they're dealing with their kids, they're dealing with their jobs, sometimes deadlines, and that tiredness and repeated expression starts to show on their face. You get lines in here, forehead lines, lines of aging, and one of the big ones is loss of volume. It just kind of can make you look tired. And I do a really good job at subtly providing natural results to dial back the clock 5 to 10 years. And so, the working 45-year-old mom is probably my number 1 patient.
Yeah, that's and the fact that you specialize in the face only, is that would you consider that a differentiator versus some of the other medical professions that do what you do, but maybe do it more than just the face?
Yeah, I like to call my studio a boutique facial rejuvenation studio. It's very personal. It's just me in a room. They meet me. I talk to them. I message them for follow-up. And it's a very hands-on approach with that, underlying caring. And the bottom line is I'm good at what I do. I'm good at getting good results.
Absolutely. And if the growth that you've experienced is a testament to that, I don't know what else is. So in this age of post-pandemic, right? COVID-19 occurred in 2020, about 3 years ago. I've got to believe that there is no Zoom option or video conferencing option to what you do unless that's in the initial consult. So basically, you're one of the few well, maybe most medical professions are always face to face, but clearly that's exactly what you do. It's got to be in person then, right?
Exactly. I mean, there has been a big boom in telemedicine since the pandemic, and I think there's a good mix between what can be done in person, what can be done in telemedicine, and what cannot. I think more things are moving to telemedicine, which I don't think is all good, and I think some of that will fail. But what I do is procedural, so it's literally hands-on. So there's no way to do it today.
Yeah. Obviously, there's no touch and feel with video. It basically you have to be there and basically see what it is that you're going to assist your patients with.
No.
We are approaching the end of our time allotment, Dr. Mike, and is there anything we haven't covered in the questions and the answers you provided during the course of this video?
No, I think this has been great.
Good. Well, I appreciate you sharing your insights, and it's great to hear from another successful business owner, and especially one with the tremendous growth that you are experiencing right now. How can we find out more about you? Where can we go, either on the web or phone number or email address?
The best way would be to check out my website, which is www.fabfacemd. My tagline is "Helping You Look Fabulous," so it's the fabfacemd.com. And then you can call my office at 773-549-4772, and they can get you scheduled if you want to see me.
That's great. Thanks so much. We appreciate your time and sharing your insights on your successful development over the course of your career. Thank you, listeners, for another episode of Building Better Businesses. And as we have indicated before, there's a lot on this program. Many lessons you can learn from building better businesses. And here we have one from a medical professional that has done a great job in getting to where he is today. Thanks again, Dr. Green. We appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for joining in.
Thank you, Steve.